Good morning, or good evening if you're joining us from Europe, and welcome to our monthly lectures. I am Shannon Bay, the Program Manager of Adult and Community Engagement at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. I would like to begin by recognizing the lands of the Pueblo people, on which the sites of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum stand. We recognize and honor their elders, past and present, and celebrate the vitality of their people today and into future generations. I offer this with humility and gratitude, in acknowledgement of the need to confront the ongoing injustices of settler colonialism. Now for some Zoom housekeeping. If you have not done so, please introduce yourself in the chat. You have the option to send a message to everyone or to the host and panelists. We encourage you to share with everyone where you're tuning in from so we can make connections this morning. If you're using an iPad, the chat can be found at the top of your screen. And sometimes the chat box can be a little annoying. You might want to close it. You should be able to just click the X and close it during the talk. You can also move it around your screen if it pops up in the middle by dragging it with your mouse. We also are providing closed captioning this morning, which you can locate the CC on your screen. It's either at the top or the bottom, depending on your device. And you can turn it on or off by clicking the CC. I would like to extend a thank you to our members and donors who are here today. Your support made this event possible. And if you're not yet a member and enjoy this program, please consider joining today. Visit gokm.org/membership to learn more. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for this morning, Marta Ruiz del Árbol. She's the curator of modern painting at the Museo Nacional Thyssen-Bornemisza in Madrid, Spain, where she is in charge of 20th century painting collection. She has curated exhibitions including Georgia O'Keeffe, which we're going to learn more about today, and Sonia Delaunay, art, design, and fashion. Please welcome Marta.
I would like to start with a quote by Anita Politzer. Each time O'Keeffe reached home, she thought she would stay, but she's always interested in what lies on the other side of the hill. Thank you very much, Shannon, for introducing me. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very, very honored to be here with you today. The show, my talk today, I would talk about the show that took place in Madrid last spring and summer on Georgia O'Keeffe. I'm fully aware that you know a lot about this artist, but I hope I will give you another perspective, a new perspective. I can say maybe a Spanish perspective or a Thyssen perspective that will give you a lot of energy that after hearing my talk, you will be feeling like you want to visit our museum, or that you want to book a flight and come to Europe and see the exhibition that is still going in Paris at the Centre Pompidou, and that will be early next year on show at the Bayeler Foundation in Basel, Switzerland. I will share now my screen. Wait, I don't see what I'm sharing. Excuse me. Please excuse me, I don't know what happened. Oops.
I see your PowerPoint.
Now,
there you go.
Now it's okay. Yes, okay, perfect. Excuse me. I have divided my lecture in 3 main chapters. I have structured it. The first one is about Georgia O'Keeffe and the Museo Thyssen-Bornemisza. The second one is on Georgia O'Keeffe and Spain. And the third would be a tour. We would do together a tour and virtual tour through the exhibition in Madrid. We could start with a question. Why did the Museo Thyssen-Bornemisza? Why did we want it absolutely to have an exhibition on O'Keeffe in Madrid? Why we felt it necessary to organize it? Well, you probably know that there are only a few O'Keeffes outside United States. During the preparation of the long preparation of this exhibition, we could trace how many works there were in total outside the United States. And I can tell you, we found out there are approximately, there can be more that we could not trace, but there are 9 works by her outside the United States. One is in a private collection in Switzerland. 2 are at the Centre Pompidou. One is at the Centre Pompidou in Paris, and 2 are at the Lembach House in Munich. And the other 5 are here in Madrid at the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum. So we are the institution that owns the largest number of works by these artists outside the United States. I'm going to show them to you, these 5 works by her that we have in our collection. The first one is, the earliest one is Abstraction Blind 1 from 21. You have it on your left, on your screen on the left. The second one is Shell and All Shingle 5 from 26. This belongs to a long series of 7 paintings. 5 of them are at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and one in San Luis. We could have the one in San Luis next to our painting during the exhibition, and it was very nice to see the relation between the both paintings. And on your right, you have this very famous New York with Street Moon, painted in 1925. That is not part of our permanent collection, but loan from Carmen Thyssen-Bornemisza, from the widow of the baron that founded our museum, and it's only on loan. That it's famous because it was the first cityscape that O'Keeffe painted of New York. Then we have 2 more paintings, both from the 50s. The one on your left is titled From the Plains 2. It was painted in 54, and it's very closely related to one painting in the George O'Keeffe Museum that is entitled Series Number 1 From the Plains, and it was painted in 1919. And it was a recall painted in New York, but thinking of the Texan landscape. And this one is also related to this Texan experience that was so important to her. And it's a much larger in format, in other colors, but closely related, as you will see later. And then we have a flower, a late flower, painted in 57. Why that? Why do we have 5 paintings by O'Keeffe in an European museum? How strange. Let me briefly explain you that the Museo Nacional Thyssen-Bornemisza is a very rare exception on the European museum scene on account of our very large, well, not very large, but very high quality collection of American paintings. Other European institutions do have American art, but their collections normally start with works done after the Second World War, like the ones you have on the screen. This is a photograph of our galleries, and you see the works by Rothko, by Clifford Steele, by Maurice Lewis. Our nice O'Keeffe painting is also in a central place in this room. De Kooning, Hans Hofmann. Well, you can find these artists also in other European collections. But what makes our collection very, very unique for an European institution is that we also have paintings by 19th century masters. Almost every school is represented, and also some examples of 18th century masters. You have on your screen a photograph where you see between the windows is a Thomas Cole. It's called Expulsion, Moon and Firelight. On your left, you have John Singleton Copley and Charles Wilson Peale. And on your right, Cropsey Church. But you also have examples for American Impressionism. And we also have not only O'Keeffe, but examples from other early US modernists like Stuart Davis, Arthur Dove, Charles Simuth, but also Hartley. So very, very rare for an European collection. And we have to thank this unique collection to one single person, to Hans-Heinrich Thyssen-Bornemisza, the founder of this museum. We are now celebrating his 100th anniversary with many events. And one of these events is going to take place this December. We are going to open a new installation of the American exhibition. We got a grant from the Terra Foundation, and we are studying the collection from new perspectives. We are going to analyze from our European perspective this part of our collection, and we are bringing together works that he collected that are now in the collection of her wife, in the collection of their children. So it's going to be a great event for us. And let me introduce you a little bit this guy, this Baron Thyssen-Bornemisza. He was the son of a German industrialist. He was also a businessman. Hans Heinrich was also a businessman, a very intelligent businessman, but also a collector. Although he came from Germany, the family came from Germany. He was born in the Netherlands and grew up in the Netherlands and Switzerland. But when he tried to explain this passion for American art, he wrote for a catalog of an exhibition of his American collection that toured the United States 7 cities in the 1980s. And he wrote, "I am very attracted by all American artists, maybe because I'm a quarter American." We know that his grandmother was American. She was called Matilde Louise Price and came from Delaware. To this, we must also add that from the early 70s onwards, he spent many periods in the United States on business. So he was also very interested in making connections with America. But he continued his quote and saying, not only because he was a quarter American, but also mainly because of the artist's profound love for nature, space, and perfection. If you walk through our galleries, which I hope you will do after hearing my talk, you will be able to check yourself Baron Thyssen's personal taste and his love for landscape paintings. That's landscape paintings, impressionist paintings. There are a lot of examples, and then all this American collection we are talking about. This sentence is also very helpful to understand why he could be attracted to the work of Georgia O'Keeffe. She indeed occupies a prominent place in our collection, being the best represented American artist. It is known that he regarded her as the finest American painter of the 20th century. And we know that not only because of the 5 paintings we have in our collection, he also bought 3 more. You have them on the screen. The one on your left belongs now to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts and was part of our exhibition in Madrid. We could see it in real just a couple of weeks ago. And the 2 on your right were also part of his personal collection, but he sold them. And as far as we know, they are now in private hands. They are in private collections. You will now understand why this American collection has such a central place for us in our museum since we opened in 1992. Not only for the collection, but also our temporary exhibitions have focused on many American artists. For example, we did an exhibition on 19th century American landscape painting. We also devoted an exhibition on American Impressionism, abstract expressionist, also monographic exhibitions on Edward Hopper, Robert Rauschenberg, or Andrew Wyeth. And we have wanted to show O'Keeffe for more than 20 years. Yes, 20 years. But showing O'Keeffe is not easy. It's always a show being prepared. Museums are reluctant to lend their masterpieces. Finally, 4 years ago, we found the right moment. We went to Santa Fe and met Cody Harley. And he and his team were so supportive. We started this international collaboration with them. Thank you again for all what you did. And with the Centre Pompidou and the Fondation Bellier, we did this exhibition possible, making for many, many Europeans to see for the first time, the works by O'Keeffe in real and for many discover her life and work. And when I say first time, I really mean first time. In Spain, for example, our exhibition was the very first comprehensive exhibition on George O'Keeffe. Only in 2002, almost 20 years ago, around 35 works by O'Keeffe were shown in an exhibition here in Madrid. It was a very nice, but also very small exhibition. Finally, this year, we were able to give her the big retrospective she deserved. May I mention that that is also the first time that Paris has a monographic exhibition on O'Keeffe, and it's also the same with Basel in Switzerland. This might surprise some of you, but O'Keeffe was still, until very recently, not so well known in Europe as she is in the USA. I'm happy to say that this is changing very, very quickly. With this show, the organizers of the exhibition, we wanted to bring her work to broader audiences, and we are succeeding. The exhibition in Madrid had a huge success of press and public. It was like, or it's been like a tsunami. Everyone is fascinated with her work, and many wonder, why did they not know her before? In Madrid, so I give you just one number, we had more than 100,000 visitors. That was our maximum for the time. When we started the exhibition, we still were in the middle of the pandemic, and we had limited our access to make the visit secure. So, but every day the tickets were sold out. So we were so happy, and we saw the faces of people coming out so happy under their mask, of course. But it really seems like O'Keeffe came in the right moment to Madrid, when when the trees were blowing, when things were starting to get better after the hard months of the pandemic. And it was a very revealing experience for so many visitors, having again an aesthetic experience, and that this experience was with works by O'Keeffe. It had a great impact in our visitors. I also want to mention how generous the George O'Keeffe Museum was, and also the more than 30 American museums that planned for these exhibitions, because when we opened in April, there were many traveling restrictions and for passengers, and all the works traveled alone. You know, these works are so high, have such a high value that normally they will always travel with a courier, and they have allowed to travel the works alone just to give us the opportunity of showing her in Madrid. So thank you again for making this possible. But let's go back some years to the moment where I started reading about O'Keeffe and discovering that she had visited twice my country, Spain. As you can imagine, I was very interested in knowing more about these two visits to my country and surprised to know that O'Keeffe, an artist, you know it perfectly, that had traveled a lot, but that had rarely left the United States. She had been before to Bahamas, Canada, and Mexico, I believe I have all, and never ventured beyond the Americas, decided to come first to France and then to Spain, and then a year later come again to Spain. What had happened? What led her to choose this country and decide to return so soon afterwards? What did she find here that inspired her to pack her bags and carry on exploring the world? This happened in 1953. So you have her on the screen looking at the camera, a photograph by Laura Gilpin, 65 years old. She decides to take a ship, cross the ocean, visit France, and then by car, go south and arrive to Madrid. And we know that she was fascinated by the Museo del Prado. The visit to the Madrid Art Museum is the aspect of this first European trip that has most been stressed in chronologies, and she too considered it particularly significant. In an interview to the New Yorker in 1974, she remembered, "I am very critical. I don't seem to have the kind of pleasure I know a lot of other people have in pictures. That's why I was so surprised when I went to the Prado in 1953, because everything there was so exciting to me. Of all the artists that she viewed in the Madrid Museum, she was particularly fascinated by the paintings of Francisco de Goya. And perhaps it was Goya's enigmatic works that led O'Keeffe to return to Spain only a year later, in 1954. Her first visit did not seem to have been enough for her. Anita Politzer, her friend from the youth, stated in A Woman on Paper that O'Keeffe went back because there were, I quote, paintings in the Prado she felt she had to see again. This could have been remarkable for an artist like O'Keeffe, who usually rejected other paintings' influence. Other biographies have stated that she planned her second trip between March and May 54, May 54, to be able to enjoy Spain's particular Easter celebrations. Please allow me to make a small point and give you some details about how was Spain when O'Keeffe came for the first and second time. Spain was a very isolated country that was gradually, slowly beginning to open up to tourism after the Civil War and a very long post-war period. It was also slowly emerging from the isolation it has suffered and starting to slow economic growth. The previous year, in 1953, so the first year O'Keeffe came to Spain, the state of Spain, the government had signed the agreements known as the Pact of Madrid with the United States, marking the permanent incorporation of Franco regime into the Western Bloc. You have the dictator Franco hugging Eisenhower on your left. This was a few years later in 1959, but symbolized this acceptance of the Franco dictatorship by the Western Bloc. And it also, it's kind of funny, I wanted to share it with you. It was also in 1953 when Coca-Cola started to be sold in Spain. So things were starting to change slowly. In the screen, on your left, you have the first posters, advertisers that began to be done in Spain to try to get the attention of those tourists that start to come, and how Spain decided to highlight the Pinteresque and exotic of long-established traditions like the flamenco on your left, or the Holy Week processions, all these long-established traditions so tied to the Catholic faith of Spain. I firmly believe that when she first came to Spain, the Spanish language, as well as the Catholic traditions, must in many ways have reminded her of her adoptive homeland, New Mexico. Already in some of her works produced in 1929, like this wonderful gray cross with blue from Albuquerque that we had in our exhibition, she had shown her fascination with these expressions of the Catholic fervor, although she wrote that this was like a thin and dark veil that spread over the New Mexico landscape, and this was closely linked to the Hispanic roots of the region of New Mexico. Nevertheless, the memories she took back with her from that second trip revealed that what most fascinated her about this visit were not the expressions of faith in the streets of Madrid, were not really the paintings by the painters of the Museo del Prado, although she kept also a lot of postcards from that visit. But what she was fascinated most was the bullfights she watched. The archives from the research center at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum hold a sizable collection of bullfight brochures, tickets, and press cuttings, as well as many photographs of bullfighters, toreros. It also includes a small edition of Goya Tauromaquia. Perhaps it was this series of prints that introduced Georgia O'Keeffe to the world of bullfighting. The painter, who always showed a clear preference for nature-related themes throughout her lifetime, had a similar attraction for human expression attached to deep-rooted ancestral practices. Just as on arriving in New Mexico, she developed an interest in the traditions and ceremonies of Native American peoples, so too in bullfighting must she have sensed the old-fashioned bulls held for Mediterranean cultures. To her, as to so many avant-garde artists, this colorful spectacle conjured up reminiscence of the ancient cult of vitality and confrontation with death. On returning from her trip, she was eager to attend bullfights in the neighboring Mexico and continued to research the subject, as attested by the books of the art of bullfighting that you can find in her library. The Spain box in the research center, you know, she kept boxes of every travel she did, also includes an itinerary of a trip around the Iberian Peninsula dating 1955, which indicates that she intended to visit the country for a third time at some point. Although in the end, she never traveled again to Spain, this experience was the beginning of the numerous travels she did to other remote lands. Following her Spanish experience, O'Keeffe went on to explore many corners of the world during the next 2 decades. You know, she traveled to Peru, to Asia, Middle East, Greece, Egypt, England, Australia. I love this image where you see her riding a camel in Morocco when she was 87 years old. So she turned the last third of her life into a period of discoveries as she ventured beyond the borders of the United States. But why at this point of her life. Let's go back to 53. Why only 4 years after having moved permanently to New Mexico in 1949? For me, it was surprising to learn that she began planning long stays away from her new home so soon after managing to settle permanently in New Mexico. Her new personal situation must have significantly influenced her decision. Stiglitz, had died in 1946. Following the months she spent managing his estate, for the first time in many years, she was able to organize her own agenda with total independence. She had furthermore reached maturity. Her reputation as an artist was firmly established, and she was comfortably off. But I found another possible reason in her correspondence with William Hobart Schubert, her financial administrator in the early 50s. In her letters that are kept at the Beinecke Library in Yale, O'Keeffe, in one of the letters, O'Keeffe had written about the possibility of traveling to Europe, although in first instance, she was not very interested in this idea. Despite O'Keeffe's initial misgivings, her nephew-in-law, Schubert was nephew of Stiglitz, convinced her of the opportunities a change of scenery could bring her and encouraged her to set off on an adventure which, according to him, could be an excellent chance to come into contact with, I quote, new colors to work with, new ideas. The travel passion, this first transatlantic experience awakened in her, proves that Schubert was right, and that after more than 20 years painting New Mexico, the artist may have been looking for new sources of inspirations in her getaways. Yet, her first two European trips made no mark on her paintings or sketchbooks, nor did many of the places she went on to visit, although there were two exceptions: her visits to Peru in 56 and to Japan in 1960, that did inspire some drawings and some paintings. Neither ever replaced New Mexico as a source of subject matter for her paintings. This has sometimes led the final stage of her life to be regarded as a period unrelated to the rest of her creative career, in which she lost her the passionate involvement with her own art, and she traveled more and she worked less. However, in my opinion, O'Keeffe's life and work were never separate entities, but made up a single extraordinary coherent whole, and travel played a prominent role in that whole from the outset. It is a constant feature that can be traced throughout her entire career, from her youth in Wisconsin to her years as a teacher in Texas to her trips to New Mexico. And it is the most obvious proof of her boundless curiosity, her interest in the unknown, that lies at the very heart of all her creation. For me, the force with which it appears in her final years, when she ventured beyond the Americas, is merely the mature expression of something that had always been there and was essential to her creative process. As Anita Politzer stated in her book, A Woman on Paper, I already read it before, each time she reached home, she thought she would stay, but she is always interested in what lies on the other side of the hill. This statement, referring to O'Keeffe's travels around the world beginning in the 1950s, essentially expresses the wanderlust that led her to explore faraway lands. But for me, it also refers to places closer to home, literally on the other side of the next hill. This sentence for me also helps to introduce another concept that was very important for the thesis of the exhibition in Madrid. She was not only a traveling artist, she was also a walking artist. It is noteworthy that from a very early age, she developed the habit of going for walks, which she continued to practice until her last years. Whenever she went, she would explore it on foot, seeking a connection with her surroundings, the sense of place you only get by strolling around. The tour of the exhibition was an invitation to explore her long and prolific career through this perspective. We did a special emphasis in presenting her as a traveling artist who, after arriving at her destination, set about exploring it on foot. Emphasizing her infinite curiosity, an interest in the unknown that was at the beginning of her wish to travel, we invited visitors to discover her deep connection with the places she visited and her empathy with nature. Please remember at this point that people were entering the galleries at the time when we were not allowed to leave the small region of Madrid. So Madrid is a quite small region, and we were not allowed to go out the city. We could just go to the very near countryside. So this experience of traveling with O'Keeffe, of this need that we all had living in a big city, of empty spaces, of infinite, was really very, very, very emotional for all the persons that could see the exhibition. Are you ready to start the tour of the exhibition? Let's go. You have here, you have here the plan of the exhibition. You see, we started in room number 1, and there were 8 rooms that displayed the works chronological, but also at the same time, a kind organized also by subject. If you wish, I'm going to go through, but if you wish, you can, after my talk, look in our website, the website of the Museo Thyssen-Bornemisza. You will find a virtual tour of the exhibition if you feel like doing it. It's also available. So and the people went in and found the first works with which George O'Keeffe surprised New York's cultural and artistic elite in the 1910s. We had just one charcoal coming from Milwaukee. These works are very fragile and they cannot really travel, so each venue has one of these pieces, but we wanted to show, with this selection of works, we wanted to show how she developed his personal style, starting with renouncing to color, although we think of her as a great colorist. When she developed her style, she renounced to color, then adds blue, and then all the other colors. And for us, it was also very important to emphasize the modernity of and originality of O'Keeffe, and highlight that she did many of these works while she was working as a teacher in South Carolina and Texas, far away from the artistic centers, but she was fully aware of what was happening there. So this kind of connection with what was happening, but at the same time, this kind of doing it yourself and expressing it in her own way. It was also relevant to give a proper context to our audience. Our Spanish visitors do know very little about what was happening at the beginning of the 20th century in America when we speak about art, and they probably thought that America was already New York was the world capital of the arts that it is now. And we had to explain them that this happened later, that she was really a pioneer. Excuse me. A selection of watercolors was also in the first room, excuse me, and allowed us to show O'Keeffe's powerful connection with her surroundings. These works show her fondness for infinite horizons and helped us to introduce her working habit. In her letters to Anita Politzer at that time, she described how her daily routine consisted of teaching, painting, and going for walks. This inner need, present from a very early age, became one of her main habits. The traveling artist, as I have said before, was above all and more than anything else, a walking artist. Like Nietzsche, who claimed that to write, one feet needed to be involved, a reference to the need to walk in order for thoughts to flow. O'Keeffe walked to be able to draw and subsequently paint. Before picking up the charcoal, long before grasping the brush and bringing it to the canvas, the painter went for walks, and this act should be considered the first essential step in her meticulous creative process. As you see, we connected room 1 with room 2 by using the Texan landscape that appeared in the watercolors and continued to be reflected in some of the oils that she did when she settled in New York in 1918. And you see that here is one of our thematic groups we have that I mentioned you before. We have included here this late landscape of the 50s, our painting from the plains that is so closely related to the one on the left, the blue version, the early version, and the one from Philadelphia, that are so closely related. So how she later came to this Texan landscape once again. We also emphasize in this room her role as a pioneer of abstraction. The visitor could admire some of the work where she tried to create a visual equivalent of music, and also some examples of her first flower paintings. And room 3 was brought attention to O'Keeffe's new routine, and this when she started to divide her time between the city and the countryside. Summers and autumns at Lake George, and winters and springs in New York City. So our visitors could see these two Americas side by side, these new modern skyscrapers that were being built in New York, and then the barns that were so closely related to her childhood in Wisconsin. And here again, we found her as a walking artist. To make this more visible, our visitors could admire one of the notebooks where O'Keeffe took sketches during his city walks. I don't know if you can see it, but the Chrysler building is sketched in the notebook, and the other drawing is a sketch of New York Street with Moon, the painting in the Carmen Thyssen-Bornemisza collection. This series of views of Manhattan show us O'Keeffe the flâneuse, who roamed the streets and attentively observed what was going on. Like so many other artists in her day, of her day, she was attracted by the changes in this big city. Even so, in many of these works, her true interest does not lie in analyzing the volumes of the striking new urban architecture. Sometimes the buildings seem to provide a frame for the moon and the clouds or the sun that surround it. Even in the city, nature was her true concern. That's my feeling. We have arrived to the middle. We are now in middle of our tour. Here you see we are in a big room, number 4, that we devoted to natural world. Here we sacrifice again the chronological structure to emphasize the importance that the observation of the small objects that she found in nature had for her. Poppies, irises, Jonkins, Jimson weeds shared space with other natural objects like leaves or shells, which the artist collected during her walks and later captured on the canvas. I quote O'Keeffe, "I have picked flowers where I found them. I have picked up seashells and rocks and pieces of wood where there were seashells and rocks and pieces of wood that I liked. When I found the beautiful white bones on the desert, I picked them up too and took them home." These organic souvenirs were taken to the studio where they became the subject matter of her works. Here you have her as a collector of apples and flowers, photographs by Stiglitz. And once again, the action of working together with that of collecting was the first stage of the creative process. With this action, she brought nature into studio, thereby ensuring that it never ceased to play an important role in her painting. After being captured on canvas, these found trophies became part of a very particular collection that decorated O'Keeffe's successive studies and homes. You have this very famous Life magazine article of 38 that show the whole process, how she kept the bones in the desert and how she took them to her penthouse in Manhattan and the place these objects occupied in her home, or in Abiquiu, where these objects are often placed on the seals of the large windows that connect the interior with the exterior of the house and create a perfect transition between the two spaces. So in a way, for me, it's like she's like painting outside. She makes this transition so that she has this strong connection with the landscape, even if she is painting inside. And we keep on going. We are walking to the end. Room 4 and 6 were devoted to the discovery of New Mexico, an experience that would change her life forever. The majestic landscape, the powerful presence of the native culture, and as I mentioned before, the region's Hispanic past inspired a new shift in her art, as did the bones of dead animals. I found a letter to Etty Stettheimer written in August 1929, revealing for the reasons of this trip far away, this first trip. It was not the first, but the first long trip to New Mexico. Written during her train journey back to the East Coast after spending several months in the desert, O'Keeffe was honest about having felt the need to get away. She commented how, on viewing after visiting her latest exhibition, she had realized she needed to, and I quote, "get back to some of my own ways or quit." And that she had done up until then was that she was almost dead for me. So she needed to change. And this change was again to travel, to discover, to be on the nature, to be in this close relation to nature and seeing new places. Overwhelmed by a feeling of creative exhaustion, she sought ways of reconnecting with her essence through which she knew would bring back her inspiration, exploring the world again and immersing herself in nature. As a result of that revealing experience, she began alternating periods spent with Stiglitz with others in the very far west. She explained this in her own words in a letter written some time later. She said, I quote, "I am divided between my man and a life with him and something of the outdoors that it is in my blood." During the 1930s and 1940s, O'Keeffe spent nearly every summer in New Mexico, traveling her car and exploring the area. You have here, we show a selection of the paintings of the famous Black Place, and also we had also a painting of the White Place. We had also pelvis bones and dead trees, and we come to the room 7, where we decided to expose a selection of her late works that helped us to present her as a local artist, but also at the same time as a global artist. Now, this very strong coexistence of both. She's very tied, she's very connected to New Mexico, but at the same time, she's a global artist, and that's why she speaks. We feel her in Spain so near. We can love her as much as you love her in America. The paintings of the new patio of her house in Abiquiu were confronted to the ones that she did, inspired by her international trips, where that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. The many hours she spent flying led her to adopt a new perspective. Amazed by the beauty of the world seen from high up, she produced works that seem to link up with her early abstract works. It's like closing the circle at the end of her life. O'Keeffe, the traveler, seemed to have realized that what mattered was not so much the destination as the journey itself. Before leaving the exhibition, our visitors could enter in a small room, small cabinet devoted to the studio. After her many travels and countless works, Georgia O'Keeffe returned to her studio, where she worked alone. There, away from the gaze of others, she continued her creative process, which was reconstructed in this last room with the help of some objects from her atelier. We are very grateful to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum for lending us these objects that you have in the vitrine, also some river stones of these collected objects that she kept. In this very last room, the visitor could understand O'Keeffe's working method. The visitor could discover a methodical, persevering, and technically skilled artist that meticulously executed a plan that was carefully calculated. I'm sure you know how she worked. The tour ended with a video where we explained the results of the technical study we had done of the five canvases from the Thyssen-Bornemisza collection. For us, every exhibition project gives us the opportunity of learning more about our own painting, and this was not an exception. One of the reasons of this project was the close collaboration that from the very first moment was established with the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. We, curators and conservators of the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum, were able to work and learn from our colleagues at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. Obviously, I have to mention, they have all been so helpful, but I have to mention, obviously, Cody Harley, Dale Concrite, and Ariel Plotek. Dale Concrite and Ariel Plotek also wrote essays for our catalog. The very close collaboration has made it possible to explore O'Keeffe's painting techniques through a close comparative observation of her works in the Thyssen collections and the pictures loaned for these exhibitions by the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe. The findings of this research identified the need to restore one of the works you have here from the plains too. I'm sure you are recognizing it. In the image, my colleague Marta Palau is in the process of restoring the painting. Apart from this, we organized a series of lectures, a program for rural women that came to the museum accompanied by our didactic team. And we also published a comic on O'Keeffe that is being now translated into English. I'm sure you will love it once it has been published. Here you have the cover of the comic. Excuse me. Maria Herreros, a young Spanish illustrator, has been the author of this book, and in my opinion, she has done a wonderful and very difficult work. She only the artist Maria Herreros only expresses her personal opinion about George O'Keeffe at the end of the book, in one of the pages at the end. And to conclude my talk today, I will translate what she writes about O'Keeffe, what she has felt, as so many people like me have felt after having been involved with George O'Keeffe. Maria Herreros speaks about the legend that says that her ashes were spread in the Pedernal mountain, and she continues saying that, I am sure, I quote Maria Herreros, I am sure that her energy, O'Keeffe's energy, lasts in the universe for everyone who is able to stop and admire it. Thank you very much for hearing me today. I hope you have enjoyed my talk, and know a little bit about the backstage of the exhibition. And I hope I will meet you someday looking at one of our 5 paintings in Madrid, or maybe at the exhibition in Paris or Basel. Now I'm happy to answer your questions or hear your comments if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. That was excellent. It was so thorough, and you just took us right through the exhibition. That was wonderful. And you said that there is a video, a walkthrough of the exhibition. So I will be sure to email that link to everyone who's here at the talk today so that you can experience that at home. So we did have a couple questions. So the catalog is produced in English, and I know that Katrina put the link in the chat so that you can purchase it from the George O'Keeffe Museum shop. We have several copies left in stock, so please check that out. It is a wonderful catalog. And we had a question, I'll check for more questions, but we had a question about O'Keeffe and Picasso. Do you know if they ever met when she traveled to Spain, or potentially maybe in France?
Well, it's known that she traveled, the first time she traveled in 1953. She came to Europe with Mary Callery, that was also an artist, and she knew Picasso, and she offered her to travel to meet Picasso, but O'Keeffe was not interested at all. She said, I don't speak French, she doesn't speak English, what would we have to say to each other? So she was apparently not interested in meeting him. And this was very curious, because when you read about her coming to Europe and to Paris, she was not at all interested in the contemporary scene. She was visiting cathedrals and museums, but not really interested in meeting artists.
Interesting. Well, we have another question. So a few slides back, you had shown us a painting that on the back of the painting, someone had written, keep fingers off edges. Do you happen to recall which one that was and like who wrote that?
What was it?
It was you showed us the back of a painting, and someone had written on the back, like, keep fingers off edges.
Who wrote it? We don't know. We know this painting was in the collection of the son of John Marin. So maybe it was these backs of the paintings. For our conservators, it was also very interesting to see the back of George O'Keeffe's painting, because normally they don't find, our conservators that see works by many artists, they don't find usually these protections. So, and they were fascinated that she, at this very early stage in the 20s, was aware that if you put a panel on the back of the painting, it's going to the conservation is going to be better. So she was fully aware, and our conservators were also fascinated by her and all her techniques and how careful she worked. And yeah, sometimes you can trace who wrote an inscription, but in this case we don't really know who wrote that.
Yeah, it is interesting to see the back of her artworks because they do
they are wonderful.
Yes. Well, and one final question, because we're right at the top of the hour. What is there a particular O'Keeffe painting that is your favorite from this exhibition?
Well, if I had to choose one, I would choose the one from Dallas. You know, this abstraction, this, I think it's called Pink, Blue, and Gray. That is like, it's an abstraction of 29 that she did after having traveled to New Mexico. And it's supposed to be like her way of representing native dance. So this one was my absolute favorite, but it was difficult to walk through and decide which one I would prefer. But I think this was my very, very favorite.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing because the O'Keeffe Museum is the largest repository, of course, of O'Keeffes in the United States. But there's so many beautiful paintings and collections across the country. And you did such a beautiful job of pulling all of those paintings together. So.
Yeah, but as I said, thanks to you. So the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum was so supportive and so helpful. So your support was, without your support, we couldn't have done it. So thank you again.
Yes. Well, thank you, Marta, for a wonderful talk. And this is being recorded and will be available on our website sometime next week after we get some subtitles added. So thank you, Marta. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.